So we are on page Nun Hey. What's that?
Hospitality?
Yes, exactly. On page Nun Hey. So in this list of 8 expressions of Chesed, because remember we are in the sphere of Chesed, although within the discussion of the sphere of Chesed we've actually discussed in quite detail many of the other spheros. But the larger picture is that we are in the sphere of Chesed, where the author is going to continue after Chesed and go through the other spheros chapter by chapter. Within Chesed there are, I believe, 8 different expressions of Chesed, which he says that we can actually cleave to the ways of God by acting in a way of Chesed, in fact, so far as doing Chesed with God himself. And that initiated this discussion of 8 different forms of Chesed where one does these acts of Chesed. He can have in mind that he's doing Chesed with Hashem, as it were, Mechasedim Kono, in order to affect the spiritual realm through the physical acts of Chesed that he's doing. So within that context, we're up to the 5th one, which is Hachnosas Orchim. That is the providing hospitality for wayfarers, taking people into one's home. So in the realm of the spheros, he correlates that to the spheros of Tiferes and Yesod. So who are the Orchim? Who are the guests? Who are the wayfarers? They are Tiferes and Yesod. Why are Tiferes and Yesod considered to be like the wayfarers? We've discussed earlier how when the spheros are out of line, when there is a state of Golus, when Malchus goes into exile among the nations, that results in a dislocation of the spheros. So that, for example, Tiferes and Yesod can become dislocated. We spoke earlier about how Yesod was called an Oni and Tiferes was called a Ger, referring to how the sphere of Tiferes, if it's dislocated from its place as a result of an unbalanced flow of energy, resulting in type of an exile, where Malchus goes into exile, so that results in Tiferes going out of its place as well, making it like a Ger, like a stranger. And in this way, Tiferes and Yesod are like wayfarers, people who are on the way, out of their place, away from the home. And just as it's a mitzvah to bring in the wayfarer, people who are homeless or presently outside of their normal abode, so it is a mitzvah to do so regarding the spheros of Yesod and Tiferes. When they're dislocated and they are out of their home, they're out of their proper place, it's a mitzvah to bring them in and to care for their needs in order to give them some semblance of home, of being in their proper location, even though temporarily they might be, like I said, dislocated. So this, then he says, these are the spheros of the reference to Achnosas Orchim. The taking in of the wayfarers is a reference to providing for the needs of Tiferes and Yesod, these spheros which have been dislocated for the reasons that we've discussed. Noses lehem beis menucha sheyinuchu va, to provide for them a house of rest so that they can rest in it. That clearly must be referring to Malchus. Oh, it says it explicitly, Dainu Malchus, which is a reference to Malchus. Why? Because we've said how Tiferes has its hashpah down to Yesod, and the hashpah, the influence of Tiferes and Yesod, is received by Malchus. So if we were to put Malchus in its place, creating a proper focal point for the reception of Tiferes and Malchus, that would be like providing a home for the wayfarers. And if, as a result of transgressions, lack of learning of Torah study, lack of proper prayer, a Jewish person is, let's say, privately exiled from his proper place, or the Jewish people in general have been exiled from their proper place, from the land of Israel, from Jerusalem, from the Beis Hamikdash, the result is that the Malchus is not there to receive the Shefa from Tiferes and Yesod. And that results in Tiferes and Yesod going after the Malchus, and therefore also going into a state of, what's the word I'm looking for? Of exile. However, if we are able to prepare the Malchus, prepare a home, prepare an abode, putting Malchus back in its place, then there will be a place within which Tiferes and Yesod can be received. And this is compared to a man and a woman, or a husband and a wife, where it's the Gemara says it's the man's role to go seeking after the woman. So that if a woman has been, let's say, banished, so it's the role of the prince, or the man, to go pursue after the woman who's been banished in order to restore her to her proper place. And we find the same thing regarding Adam and Chava, that Chava was taken from Adam so that she became like a part of himself that was lost to him. And it was his responsibility to go looking after his lost counterpart, Chava. So that from here we see the source for the idea of a man's going and searching for a woman. Al ken yazov ish es aviv imo v'debek v'ishto. The Torah says, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and go running after and go seeking after his wife. So who's the ish? We saw that Tiferes is called ish. Tiferes is Yaakov. Ish, Tam. And therefore, right, sometimes it's necessary for the ish, which is Tiferes, la'azov es mi, to leave, depart from his father and his mother. Who's that? Chokhmah and Bina. Av ve'em. Al ken yazov ish Tiferes es aviv v'imo Chokhmah and Bina v'idabek v'ishto, in order to cleave to his wife. Who's his wife? Malchus. And therefore, if there is a dislocation, sometimes Tiferet has to leave Abba and Ima, which is its orientation between Chokhmah and Bina, and go after Malchus. However, if we were able to restore Malchus to its place, to her place, so that would spare Tiferet from having to be going into exile after her in order to restore her. And this way, Tiferet could stay within its relationship to Abba and Ima, and the Malchus and its wife, to be properly located between the three. And therefore, the mitzvah, you see, he's saying quite a lot of bit here in these three words, which you think I'm reading too much into it.
Yeah. We didn't get.
Where did I get that from?
It's all in your mind.
It's all in my mind. You're making it up.
No,
It's obvious. Chamishis, hachnosas orchim. Hachnosas orchim. Hem tiferes yasod. Leses lehem beis menucha. Right? You have to give tiferes in yasod beis menucha, a place to rest. What is that? That's Malchus. Why? On what scenario you have to give them a place to rest? If Malchus wasn't in its place, as we saw earlier, Tiferes and Malchus go into exile after Tiferes and Yesod go after Malchus into exile. We discussed all that earlier. But when we bring,
why are they going to exile?
because because what we're saying is that if you don't have Malchus to receive the shefa from Tiferes and Yesod, so what happens to that shefa? It doesn't have a cap. It doesn't have a bis kibble. So what happens to it? It's dispersed across the world. The shefa goes among. Remember, we discussed how the shefa then goes among the nations. And Israel, who's in exile, dislocated from Yerushalayim, gets its shefa through the goyim, and not directly from Hashem, through Malchus. Right? So I'm just elaborating the point here, the relationship, and talking about in this respect, the masculine, which is Tiferes and Yesod, goes after the Malchus, which is the feminine. And that corresponds to a man going after a woman, which is related to Adam, seeking after his wife, which is described in the Torah as a person's leaving his father and his mother and going after his wife, right? Which is exactly fitting into the spheros of Chokhmah and Bina, which are Abba and Av and Em, right? Where Tiferes is separating itself from Ava Em in order to go after its wife, which is Malchus. It's beautiful. It's exactly what he's saying. It just says it in 3 words. You have to know what he's getting at. That's exactly what he means. And yeah. However, the implication of what he's saying here is that through the mitzvah of achnasas orchim, through literally taking in guests, what we're doing is we are creating a base menucha in the spheros for Tiferes and Yesod. We are
being a mother and a father.
And we're also enabling Malchus to get back to its place by taking care of these people who have been dislocated from their homes, the wayfarers and the homeless. The spiritual counterpart of that in some metaphysical way is it actually brings Malchus back to its place, or at least temporarily enables Tiferes and Yesod to have some type of resting place, some type of connection to Malchus, and not being in exile. These people have been exiled. They're on the way. They're outside of their home. When we provide a home for them, then what we're actually doing in some metaphysical way is reestablishing Malchus to its place. So that the wayfarers, which are Yesod, which are Tiferes and Yesod, who are going into exile after Malchus, they find a place to rest in Malchus, which is like a home for it. And Malchus, by the way, is called a bais. Malchus is a bais, is a house. Why? Because we spoke about how Malchus is the sphere which is all-inclusive. It's the counterpart to Keser. Keser is all-inclusive in potential. But Malchus, on the other end of Keser, receives everything that's been dispensed by Keser. So that just like a house is really a place within which all of a person's belongings are collected and gathered, so too Malchus is a house in which all of the hashbahs coming through the spheres is collected and gathered. And therefore it's called a bais.
Like a house for the spheros.
It's a house for the spheros. Very good. And here we're talking specifically in the case of Tiferes and Malchus. But in truth, it's called bais in general because Malchus has within it everything, all of the other spheros, from Keser all the way down through. And in that respect, it corresponds to the letter He of Hashem's name, where the letter He is viewed as being a receptacle. Ele toldos shamayim v'aretz behi baram, the Torah says. These are the generations of heaven and earth when they were created. Behi baram. In the Torah, the letter He is smaller than the other letters, from which the Chazal say in the Gemara, Behi baram. With the letter He, Hashem created everything. And everything comes from Malchus. Therefore, that Malchus is like that He. The He which includes within it everything and brings everything into existence. That's the He. That's a bais. Just like, right, a house has walls and a roof. So the letter He has, right, walls and a roof. That's a He. Bina, way up top, is also called a bais.
Where did these imageries come from? I mean, is it like... I mean, are you... I
Am I
assume
making,
you're not making them up.
No, I'm not making it up. The Kabbalah talks about this.
Wow. It's amazing.
It's all interrelated. It's all interconnected.
Wow.
And Bina is also called bais, even though Malchus is centrally located at the bottom, and it's a bais because it accepts within it everything. But that Bina is also bais, right? Bina starts with the base. Bina is also a bais. Bais is to the left. But why is Bina viewed as being a bais? Because it's the feminine. And she gestates everything that she receives from Chokhmah, right? But within Bina, everything that she receives from Chokhmah starts to become differentiated. That's why I'm using it gestated. So that ultimately, right, what Bina receives from Chokhmah makes Bina a bais, a receptacle to receive all of the potential that comes through Chokhmah. Just like Malchus receives everything coming from the spheros, not in potential, but after it's been actualized, right?
Would Malchus be like a foundation of a house? I mean, because that's at the bottom, I meant to say base, like a foundation, or...
It's described as being like a house of its own, not just a foundation for a house,
Okay.
but an actual house of its own. The difference being that in Malchus, the house actually contains within it, as it were, the actual differentiated objects, whereas in Bina, in the upper house, Bina has within it not the differentiated objects, but the potential for the differentiation, which it gestates and then births into Tiferes and all the other spheres as well. So that would actually correspond to an upper letter He. So Malchus is the lower He, and Bina is the upper He. That would make Chokhmah the Yud, right? Because Chokhmah gives the Yud, that's the Koyach, into the Bina, into the He. And then, of course, the lower spheros would be the Vav, right? How would that work? Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. That's the Vav. And then the final Hey, that's the Malchus. Okay?
Wow, okay.
So you actually have two Batim, Malchus, lower bais, Bina, upper bais, but they're actually connected through the Yud of Chochmah and the Vav of what we call the lower six spheros, not including Malchus, including making it together the idea of Yud, Hey, and Vav and Hey. Okay? Yud Chochmah Keduma. Yud is just like Chochmah is like that spark of intelligence which becomes processed by Bina. So that letter Yud is like a smaller letter which really ignites, it impregnates the Hey with the potential to differentiate. And Yud is a Pina of Chochmah.
I see it now. I mean, literally.
Yes, you can see that.
Okay.
Can you see that?
Yeah, now I do. I mean, it took quite a while.
And you actually find, right, that Yud is the father, Hey is the mother, right? What happens is that Chochmah impregnates Bina, giving it potential to differentiate. The Hey itself is a Dalid and a Yud. So that the Yud of Chochmah is actually placed within the Dalid of Hey, right? The Dalid making a Hey. Where Dalid represents delineation. Dalid represents delineation. Why? Because Dalid equals 4. And like 4 corners, 4 lines make a space.
That's unbelievable, really, as a dollar. And then how does...
One minute, and then there's the 4 directions, north, south, east, and west. So the Dalid represents temporality. And what happens is, therefore, is that Yud impregnates space, leaving within its presence part of its own essence. And now that you have the union of Yud and space, you're able to draw forth, right, new creation through Vav, and then representing the final Hey. So it actually turns out that the Yud within the Hey is inverted, upside down. So you have Yud, Dalid, and then Yud. So that what that's conveying is that just like you have the Yud Chochmah Keduma, you have the Yud of Chochmah, which is preceding everything. It's accepted within the space of Dalid, making a Hey, and that Yud is always looking up towards its father. That Yud in the Hey is always looking up towards its father. That there should be a connection between the original Yud and the Yud which has been quantified within the space of creation, that's Dalid. It's true, I mean, in this particular font, you don't necessarily get the sense of the leg of the Hey being a Yud. But when you look at the way it's written in Torah scroll, it is like that.
It has a little tail to it?
Yes, it looks like a little inverted Yud.
Okay.
And in any case, therefore, you see that you have, therefore you have the 2 Batim, which are Malchus and Bina, and the relationship between Yud, which is Chochmah, and Vav, which are the lower spheros, where even within Hey, you also have that element of the original Chochmah in a smaller, constricted, tzimtzumed form, so that the inception of Yud is present throughout, from the highest Hey to the lowest Hey, right, in a tzimtzumed, limited way. But that's the whole point. Creation puts the Elokus, the presence of Hashem, within the temporality of this world. But the whole purpose of that is to be looking upwards, towards the spiritual source of everything, even though it's contained within the physical. So Hamishis, so Hachnasas Orchim, therefore, practically bringing in guests, has the effect of establishing a house, meaning restoring Malchus to its place, so that there can be an abode for the otherwise dislocated Tiferes and Yesod. I think it's a beautiful way of putting it. Kevan Shem Holchei Drochim, since these spheros of Tiferes and Malchus, they are wayfarers, they're Holchei Drochim. Basod Hagolus, which is what I was saying, yeah, which is connected to their being in exile. L'chazer al Avedosam, who are going after their lost object. I must just remember this from last time. That's the whole point. They're looking after the lost object. What is that? Tiferes and Yesod are looking for their lost object, which is Malchus. And clearly he's referring to the fact that the Tiferes and Malchus are masculine, vis-a-vis Malchus, which is feminine. And that refers to the idea I was saying before about the way of a man to go after a woman, and not a woman after a man. And there I added that's coming from Adam Rishon and Chava, based on that pasuk that I said, and the connection between Chochmah and Bina and Malchus. Therefore, what you have to do is tzarich lachnisam sham. You have to bring them in there, into that house that we created by establishing the Malchus. Ulefia misbayar bezoar shezei mitzvah miskayemes beholchei al derech sichoi. This is interesting. According to what is expounded upon in the Zohar, that this mitzvah of restoring Malchus so that you have an abode for Tiferes and Yesod is connected specifically Paholche al derech sichoi, people who are going on the way and involved in conversation. What conversation? Right? We're not talking about the sports or the weather. Yeah, it's talking about Torah. So what he seems to be saying is that the way to reestablish Malchus in its proper place so that there can be an abode for Tiferes and Yesod is to be involved in learning Torah on the way, or going out of one's way in order to learn Torah. Leaving sunny California, where some of the most pleasurable things in life have been legalized. Yeah? Leaving that place in order to come to Jerusalem and learn Torah. That does a lot to rectify what we're talking about here. Shehem hamizgarashim mi batehem lasek b'Torah. These folks are people who have been banished, as it were, from their homes. People who have left home in order to be engaged in Torah study. Maybe what he's saying here is the best way of preparing this house, restoring Malchus to its place, in order for there to be an abode for Yesod and Malchus, for Yesod, is to house and provide hospitality for people who are on the way, they're out of their homes for the purpose of Torah study. That's what I'm getting from this. The best form of guests, therefore, would be to take guys from Or Sameach into your home and have them over and provide for their needs.
Or you can look at it as like Or Sameach providing a home for.
Okay, very good. Or Sameach provide a home for these people who are on the on their way. Very nice. Yeah, on their way looking for Torah. Very good. Shagormim shehiu orchim oiskim betzorchei malchus. Shagormim, these people who have undergone exile for the purpose of Torah study, they have caused shiur orchim, the guests. Who are the guests? Tiferes and Yesod. To be involved betzorchei malchus, to be involved in the needs of the malchus. These are people who have left their homes for the purpose of Torah study, like in times of old, in Talmudic times. People would leave their homes and go study for a week at a time, or a month at a time, or years at a time. Many examples look more of people going away to study for 12 years without coming home, like Rabbi Akiva and others. So these people who would leave home for the purpose of Torah study, they're doing work in the house, but he says more specifically, they're causing the Orchim, which has got to be a reference to Yesod and Malchus, to be engaged, Tiferes and Yesod, to be engaged with the needs of the Malchus. Why? Because if they're learning Torah, they're bringing down, the Torah's effect on the spiritual realm is to bring down Shefa through the Spheros into the world. Tiferes anyway is a sphere having to do with Torah. So when they're engaged in Torah, they're actually affecting the spheros in a proper way, and therefore causing these spheros to be engaged in the needs of the Malchus. What are the needs of the Malchus? Providing for Malchus what it needs. Very nice, as opposed to what we saw earlier, and I made a reference to the beginning of the class today, that when the Jewish people are not involved in Torah study, and they're not involved in mitzvahs and davening, the result is that they go into individual or collective exile, and that sends Malchus out of its place, and the Shefa is not there to provide for the need of Malchus. And therefore it goes after Malchus. But by people who are exiling themselves, they're empathizing with Malchus by going into exile, yet they're simultaneously learning Torah. That's like bringing the Shefa that should be coming down from Tiferes and Yesod into Malchus. It's bringing it to the Malchus. And in this way, these people who are learning Torah, they are providing for the needs of Malchus. Why? Because they are causing to resonate with their Torah study the influence of the spheros of Tiferes and Yesod. And Tiferes and Yesod are about bringing their influence into Malchus. So the Torah study is providing for the need of Malchus. Beautiful. וכן כל העושה ייחוד את התפארת במלכות בבחינה אחרת וקובע מקום לתורתו, and so also anybody who makes a yichud, meaning a connection, an intimacy between Tiferes and Malchus b'pchina acheres in another way, not just through the actual Torah study, but kovea makom the Torah, so he fixes a place for his study. And I'm not sure if this is meant to complement what he said before about learning Torah while on the way, meaning exile oneself to Zohar. When a person is in exile for Torah study, he should nevertheless, when he studies, study in a regular place. Or he means two different things, which work simultaneously. One way of rectifying and making a house for Tiferes and Yesod is to exile oneself in order to learn Torah. Another way is the exact opposite, to fix a place for Torah study. So I'm not sure if he means to say they complement one each other. Mm-hmm. When a person should ideally exile himself for Torah, but when he does so, he should learn in a set place. Or they're two separate things. But in any case, one who fixes a place for his Torah study, Goram she Tiferes Yaseh Molona v'Malchus, he's actually causing Tiferes to find an abode, a place to rest, a place to dwell within Malchus. Fixing a place for Torah study, therefore, causes an intimacy between Tiferes and Malchus, so that Tiferes should dwell within Malchus. But it's all connected to Torah study, yeah?
This goes back, to the house, like, Torah study and, whatever. Wouldn't go back to, tzedakah as well? It's like a giving and taking thing? Like as much as you're giving it goes both ways?
In the case of tzedakah, we said it's taking care of the needs of the poor. Of the poor, and the poor were Tiferes and Yesod. They were Yesod and Malchus. The poor were Yesod and Malchus. And how do we take care of the poor of the Yesod and Malchus? Also through Torah study. I think he also said there that we take care of the needs of Yesod and Malchus through Torah study. But this is more than that. This, it's related, but it's actually, it's related, but there we're talking about doing tzedakah for the ger and the ani, which is Yesod and Malchus, where Malchus is poor because it has nothing of its own. Anything that has, it receives from the other spheros. And Tiferes or Yesod was ger because it could be dislocated from its place when things are askew. Here, there's an overlap between what he said there and here in terms of providing for the needs, but it's more than that. It's actually making an abode, fixing a place for the influence of Tiferes and Yesod to reside. Where there it was talking about caring for their needs in the exile, when they have no place. Here it's taking it one step further. Not only giving them what they might need wherever they might be, but actually finding a way to tie them into a home, giving them a place to dwell. V'chen perish b'tikunim, and so too it was explained in the Tikunei Zohar. Ve'el ha'orchim tzarich lachin achila. For these guests, you have to prepare food, right? Part of hospitality is preparing food for the guests, correct? Shsia, or drink. and Leviah, which is escorting them along the way. Meaning it's a mitzvah to provide for the guests food and drink, and also to escort them into your home, and when they're leaving, to escort them out of your home. So what is this food, and what is this drink, and what is this escort? It means you have to bring Tiferes and Yesod into Malchus. They are like the wayfarers that have to be brought into a place to dwell. And to give them their quote unquote achila, food. What type of food? Me'ain, what would be similar to what's referred to in the verse in Shir Shirim, Basi Lagani. I came to my garden, my resting place, right? I guess this is a reference to Tiferes. Tiferes comes into its garden, its place to dwell. Achalti yari im divshi, and I ate I ate the comb with the honey. So you see here the idea of Tiferes coming into an abode, a dwelling place. That's the garden, and in that garden it eats. What does it eat? It eats the honeycomb with the honey. We'll see shortly what the significance of the mentioning of them both are. But we know that honey is like a reference to Torah, like it says, "Achol v'dvash tachas l'shonech." Right? Milk and honey under your tongue, and it's a reference to Torah, the sweetness of the Torah. So Tiferes is consuming, it's ingesting the sweetness, the honey-like sweetness, which is our Torah. So when we learn Torah, we're actually providing a type of spiritual sweet food to sustain Tiferes. And he says, by way of further explanation here, Shu shefer ra'ui la'anhoga hatachtoina hamispeshetes mitzad hagvura hamesuka. This is the shefa, which is befitting for the proper guidance of the lower worlds, which spreads from the sweet Gevurah. What is he saying here, the sweet Gevurah? Remember, we saw earlier on that in Bina is to the left, and below Bina you have Gevurah, which means that Bina to the left, which births Gevurah, implies that Bina itself has din. But we said that in Bina, the din is nimtak, it's masoik, it's sweetened. In Gvura, it might take the manifestation of something which we perceive to be negative. And we were explaining how there that you can have Gvurim Mesukim, or Gvuras Mesukim, where you have dinim which are actually sweet. For example, when you consider the fact that sometimes punishment comes upon a person to cause him to do tshuva, or can restore an imbalance, so that the din, given Hashem's purpose for implementing it, is actually sweet. So in Bina, you actually have these types of sweetened dinim. And I think that's what he's getting at when he quotes this verse. It says, I came into my garden, and I ate the comb with the honey. You don't eat the comb. The comb is not really edible. But sometimes, but just wax. But if the honey is so sweet, and it's so powerful, that it actually sweetens the comb, and might even soften it and make it palatable when it's really not something that's supposed to be eaten.
It's also a house for the honey as well.
It's also a house for the honey as well. Very nice, beautiful. Very nice. So that according to this, through Torah study, the Torah that we learn, the sweetness that's created actually enables Tiferes to tolerate not only chesed, but also gvura, so that the gvura itself becomes nimtak. And that would be like the honeycomb, which becomes palatable as well. And this might be related to the fact that we're talking about a scenario where Tiferes and Yesod are called wayfarers because they've been dislocated because of transgression, which means there is dinim. What we're doing is we're being mataka in this through Torah study, reestablishing Malchus to its place. So even though there was din, things become sweetened, and the system is restored. That's what I'm seeing here. That would be for achila. And shtia, drinking, a similar thing. Me'ein, like it says, shasisi yeni im chalavi. I drank my wine with my milk. Mordechai, wine is a reference to? Red wine is a reference to? Devorah. And white milk is a reference to? Chesed. So it's a similar thing to what I was explaining here. The drinking involves both din and chesed. Shasisi yeni im chalavi. We don't drink wine with milk. Nobody would put wine in milk and drink it. You might put honey in milk, like it says, cholav v'dvash tachas hashonech. Yeah? But to put milk, yeah? Now here as well. The milk, the chesed, is so rich and fat and nutritious that you can actually drink it. It's actually consumed by Tiferes together with wine, which is generally din. And again, I'm connecting it to this idea of providing for the needs of these wayfarers who were sent into exile because of transgression, bringing them back through Torah study, yeah, where that restores the Malchus as a house for Tiferes and Yesod, which then consume this Torah study that we're providing for it, even though it's intermingled with a certain degree of din, coming from the Galus, coming from the exile. But the Torah study is mamtik, that din, so that the Tiferes can consume the honey with the comb and the wine with the milk. Shushefa primi min hayayin. Shushefa primi min hayayin. And beshumer. Umisod cholav hamismatek. This is the internal essence of shefa. And the wine, maybe it's a reference to the internal essence of din, which is bina, which is positive. Hameshumer, which is guarded.
Did we get to water yet?
He didn't discuss water, no. He didn't discuss water yet. Saying a lot of deep stuff here. Yain and Meshumar, that's the guarded wine. What's the guarded wine? That's the wine which is Meshumar, Mesheshes, Me'breshis. That's Pashit. That he's referring to be Pashit. I mean, it seems to me clearly he's making a reference to Yain and Meshumar must be the din which is in Bina. And it's called Yain and Meshumar, like it says, Yain and Meshumar, Mesheshes, Me'breshis. It's the wine which is guarded from the 6 days of creation. What are those 6 days? The 6 spheros. Below Bina, Chesed, right, through Yesod. So he's saying here that there's a rectification of the dinim, just like the comb is made edible through the honey, or the wine is consumed together because of the milk, so too the dinim become nimtak, they become sweetened. And in that respect, it's called yain meshumar. What's yain meshumar? It's not wine which is expressed as din. It's wine which is guarded before the sheshes me'breshis, before the transgression, before the chet of Adam Arishon. That yain meshumar is referring to the din which is in Bina, which is really chesed, coming from Chochmah. And it's above the 6 days of Breshis. 6 days of Breshis is the reference to the spheres of chesed, gvur, tiferes, netzach, chod, yesod. And therefore, we're mamtik these dinim. The dinim now are not like in Gvura. They're b'pchinas yain meshumar, which is the din which is above Gvura, in Bina. Ubisod cholav v'mismatek the kesher tiferes and malchus, and also milk, which is chesed, which is mamtik. It mollifies the din, and the result of all of this is the kasher tiferes v'malchus, to tie the tiferes with the malchus. Oh, beautiful. Yaakov and Rochel, which is the pchin of Yaakov and Rochel. We've already discussed how Yaakov is tiferes. Tiferes is ish tam, yoshev oilim. That's Yaakov. And Rochel, that's his wife, she's malchus. By the way, Rochel is also golus, which fits in beautifully here. Like it says, Rochel mevakal b'nea. The prophet says, Rochel, be consoled. Stop crying over your children who have gone into Golus. There will be a time when they'll return. So we know that Rachel is the Pchina of Golus. And Rachel is also Malchus. And we're talking about a scenario where Malchus has gone into Golus. And through Torah, which is Yaakov, we're restoring Rachel, which is Malchus, from Golus back into her bais. And that's reuniting her with her husband, which is Yaakov, which is Torah. V'gvura b'netzach v'hod. And the result of this is also connecting Gvura to Netzach and Yesod. I'll just finish off the sentence. B'netzach v'hod. Ki ken pereshu b'raya mehemana. And all of this is explained in the Zohar, in the Raya Mehemana.